me, Vicky Marie. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in this crazy world we're living in. So, sorry, my voice is a little bit, as I already done one live this morning. My voice is going already, I haven't even got started. So, good job that in this video, mainly we will be watching other videos. So, of course, we're starting the third week of the trial in the morning. Well, as far as Australia is concerned, it will start tonight as far as Spain is concerned. So I thought what I'd just do is a summary of the first 2 weeks so that we don't forget what evidence has been provided so far, what has been said so far, etc. Now, one of my members sent me one of these videos, which made me think about it. And then, of course, when I started watching that about the summary, and then I was thinking, oh, shall I do a summary? And then, of course, I found lots of other videos that were summaries of the first 2 weeks. Some summarize it, some other videos that we haven't seen from the first week. And I thought, no, it'd be good to do this because I think this third week is going to be crucial. And I mean, I think something might, the trial originally was supposed to last between 4 and 6 weeks, which of course would mean we're only 2 weeks into it. Could we possibly have another 4 weeks to go? I don't think that's going to happen. I wouldn't even be surprised if this week something happens or there's some drama or it gets resolved. Because although, as I think I've said before, I don't feel so far we've got a smoking gun in this case, but I don't think we've had the evidence presented. Yeah, in the trial, we've had the opening statements from the prosecution and the defence where it was mentioned about this digital evidence showing that Erin had actually been in areas where you could forage these death cap mushrooms. But it hasn't been presented at the trial yet as evidence and cross-examination, etc. So I just wanted to go over all the summaries, and then in the morning I will be doing a video of whatever happens tonight, which is today in Australia. We're on 2 different time zones, but it's been a very important trial. I think a very important case. 3 people lost their lives and 1 person almost died. And although sometimes, it seems like an almost jokey thing, doesn't it, talking about mushrooms? And I think the case is just so incredulous. But we do have to remember that 3 people died. This is a really serious case. But as you know, with true crime, if you didn't laugh, sometimes you'd cry. We follow true crime for whatever reasons, that we do. And but we have to be respectful to everyone. And also we have to remember that 3 people have died. But having said that, we can't lose our sense of humour, can we? Just life in general, if you didn't have a sense of humour sometimes, what's the point? But anyway, but I've been having mushrooms. It did put me off them for a while. I wouldn't eat beef Wellington. Don't like beef really, thank God. But as far as mushrooms are concerned, I do like mushrooms. Well, some mushrooms, not all mushrooms, of course. So I'm going to say hello, first of all, to those of you that are brave enough to venture into the chat. Please be respectful. If you're not respectful, you know what happens. You go in the sin bin. Oh, that's a good idea, David. Instead, you remember we were talking about that. What about the sin bin? Or that can be just for people who go in time out or whatever. Maybe I need to think of another name for this sort of bin that we're going to put all these evil perpetrators in. Yeah, sin bin. No, maybe that's not strong enough. But anyway, we'll think about it. Okay. Sorry. Let's get the video on quick. So, hi, lurkers. Hi, replay crew. Thank you to all of you for watching, liking, subscribing. Special thank you to my members. We've got a new emoji now, the waffle emoji. I'm doing it now, actually. I should put it on, shouldn't I? Because I'm waffling as we speak. You know, I like a waffle. I like the waffles, the edible waffles as well. Oh, I can't. I'm gonna. Yeah. For you members, we've got a new waffle emoji. So every time I'm waffling, or you want me to waffle, it could be either way. Maybe you want me to stop waffling, or maybe you want me to waffle a little bit more. And the waffle emoji, if you remember, is what you need to say. Either waffle more, don't waffle. A few of you are already using the waffle emoji. Waffle more or waffle less? Yeah, some people like my waffle and some people don't. But you know what? You can't please all the people all the time, can you? Right, see, I'm doing it now. I'm waffling. Hi, Maria. Hi, my angel. Hi, David. Right, I should have started from the beginning. So I've started saying hello to people in the chat without going from the beginning. Hi, David. Hi, Lexi. Yeah, remember to be polite, Alexi, in your comments, please. Hi, Heather. Hi, Admit. Hi, Angel. Oh, Heather likes my waffle. Hi, Pam. Okay. Hi, Maria. Did I say hello to Maria? I think I did. Of course, it's quite late, isn't it, in Australia at the moment? Yeah. Do you know what? I've sort of had enough of Alexi because it just keeps saying weird things. So I've given him a chance and I just can't be doing with it. So if you can't be respectful, don't join in. Sorry, Alexi. Okay, so let's have a look. Oh, let me take off my banner. Oh, and let me say, sorry, I'm getting completely confused now. This is the trouble when you get someone like Alexi on the stream. They're almost deliberately trying to derail your stream because they're like subtle trolls, trying not to be a troll, but actually they're trolling. So they derail your stream by distracting you, and I've let him distract me or her. I don't know if it's a man or a woman, but anyway, they're gone now. So yeah, thank you all for liking, subscribing, sharing, making nice comments. Thank you so much. Thank you to my members. Thank you to everyone who sent me a super chat, bought me a Ko-fi, sent me a nice email, sent me a nice message. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm trying to take my... Yeah, do you know what, David? Life's too short to wonder about whether someone's a troll or they're not a troll, or are they just deliberately putting shitty things in the comments? Life's too short. My life's too short. I haven't got that much time left on this planet that I'm going to spend it, and I've thought about it and considered it. And I notice that sometimes people do it in a very subtle way because they don't want to be banned. And do you know what? I just can't be asked. I just can't be asked. And I have not got the time or the patience to deal with idiots. So look at that. There you go. Right, let's go into the first video now. And this is the one that one of my members sent me. Thank you so much. And this is what set me off on this sort of idea that I was going to do a summary. So I've just got to find it. Sorry. What we know so far. So I want to give credit to, well, when I find where it is to share it. So yeah, let me credit the project because this is their video, but we're going to have a look at it. It's very illuminating, and it's an interesting summary of what we know so far.
The explosive details we have heard to date and just what more we can expect.
Erin Patterson stands accused of murdering her estranged husband's parents, Don and Gail Patterson, and his auntie, Heather Wilkinson, and attempting to murder Heather's husband, Ian. While the defence argues Erin
did not deliberately serve poisoned food to her guests.
We've heard from several key witnesses in the first 2 weeks of the trial, including family, hospital staff, and the only surviving guest, Ian Wilkinson. Based on Ian's testimony, Erin had unexpectedly invited the group for lunch, where they discussed her recent cancer diagnosis. However, the defence conceded she lied about the diagnosis. Ian also told the court Erin refused help plating the meals and was hesitant to.
So there's a few things there straight away, isn't it? Well, there's something that I'm not sure of, to be honest. Now, you know that Erin had invited her husband, Simon, to the meal, and he refused to go in the end. I'm just surprised she didn't call it off, really, at that time. Anyway, one of the videos we're going to watch is because some of the problem in this case for me, and probably for a lot of people, is what is the motive? Why did she do this? You're talking about a woman who had no money problems, had a lovely house, 2 children. It seems like she had everything she needed. She was, obviously I know you don't know people's real life, but she on the surface, she didn't have the problems that many people have. Most people's problems are either financial, health, relationship problems. Seems like she was the one who didn't want to get back with her husband. He speaks quite well of her most of the time. I mean, maybe they had maybe they had problems that they could not resolve. But they didn't seem to have a terrible relationship, did they? So, what was Erin's motive? Why was she prepared, if she's guilty, why was she prepared to give up all those things that she clearly had for just to sort of poison her relatives? And did she poison them, if she's guilty, as I say? Was it to murder them? Did she mean them to die? Or did she just, misjudge it? And really, she just wanted to make the meal just out of spite. And as it happened, she misjudged it and they died. So, these are the things we've got to sort of, well, we don't, but the jury has to wrestle in their heads. Did she do it? Why did she do it? Was it intention to kill? Or, so there's a lot of things to think about. And why, when her ex-husband, who I presume was the prime sort of reason, the prime sort of irky thing that was bugging her, he decided not to go, but she still went ahead instead of cancelling it. And was she hoping to hurt him in that way by killing his mum and dad, or making his mum and dad very ill?
Show guests her pantry. That she served her guests on grey plates, while hers was an orange tan colour.
Erin picked up the odd plate and placed it on the table. She took it to her place on the table.
The children of the deceased were emotional as they described their parents' final hours in hospital, having presented there the morning after the lunch. At that time, Erin had not yet sought medical help. Testimony from Ian and Heather's daughter Ruth highlighted her parents' surprise.
They talked about their concern for Erin maybe coming to hospital as a precaution. They felt she should be there also.
Erin admitted herself the following day, but despite doctors' warning she may need a liver transplant, discharged herself from hospital.
Yeah, so imagine you're at the hospital, the doctors are saying to you, well, you know, the people that you had at your lunch, they're like really ill. I think 2 of them were in a coma at the time. And you might need a liver transplant. They were probably trying to shock her, because when she was saying she wanted to go, and they were probably trying to keep her there because they were worried about her. And they said, well, you might need a liver transplant. And as I've said before in the videos that I've done before, nobody hates hospitals more than me. There's nobody would be more keener to go home than me. But if I thought the people I'd prepared a lunch for had suffered from death cap mushroom poisoning and, you know, were so gravely ill, and the doctors were telling me, oh, well, God, you know, if you might end up needing a liver transplant, I would not have left that hospital. Nobody would. I think this is a big thing against Erin. Why would you? And then, of course, there was the fact that she didn't seem that concerned about her children either, even though ostensibly, possibly, they might have suffered the poisoning from the mushrooms. So these are big things, aren't they?
Against advice.
Her life was at risk. These guys were really unwell.
As the lunch guests fought for their lives, Don and Gail's son Matthew called Erin, desperate for answers about what might have made them so sick.
She mentioned there were fresh mushrooms from Woolies and there were dried mushrooms from a Chinese grocer or supermarket. I had toxicology people who were with us who wanted to know.
Testimony from Simon claiming that as his relatives lay in hospital, Erin never once asked how they were.
It intrigued me that she didn't actually ask.
Just 6 days after the fatal lunch, Heather and Gail died while Don passed away the following day. After almost...
I think what's especially sad as well with this, isn't it? We heard the evidence that Ian and Heather, Simon Patterson's aunt and her husband, they were delighted to be invited for this meal. Delighted. Because they didn't know Erin very well. They'd never been invited for a meal at her house before, and they were so chuffed. And everyone said it was delicious as well, didn't they? So this is Ian. He was the only survivor, wasn't he? He does look as if he has recovered, physically at least. You know, he does look very sprightly, very, you know, when you think what he's been through all the time he was in hospital. And as I've said before, his psychological trauma won't be over because he's lost his wife and, you know, has been involved in this whole traumatic incident. But he does physically looks well, doesn't he? So that's good. That's one positive thing.
2 months in hospital, Ian recovered. Erin Patterson has pleaded not guilty to all charges.
Rachel Brown is an investigative journalist at the ABC who is working on the ABC podcast Mushroom Case Daily, getting about 200,000 downloads a day. You've been in court every day, face to face, really, with Erin. How has she seemed?
Well, she's actually sits behind me. She's in the dock at the back of everyone. So I've tried not to look around too much because a lot of people are doing it. I understand the need to for daily reporting, but I would feel like a zoo exhibit myself if everyone was watching every move and did she flinch, did she smile? So the only smile that I've seen is when she was watching a video of her son playing with his granddad, who's one of the people, Don, who passed away from that lunch, and they were making a rocket-propelled car in the backyard. And she's...
Now, it's interesting what she's saying there. So Erin sat right behind her in the trial, and she's saying she doesn't like to look behind because she doesn't want to make her feel like an exhibit. And I think it's probably more to the fact that you'd have to actually turn round and look round. If she was sat there right over in front of her, I'm sure she'd be looking at her all the time. And it's interesting that she said that the only times really she's seen Erin smile was that when she saw her son playing with his granddad. Now, I think Erin does love her kids. I don't think Erin took any chances with her kids at all. I don't think she would have given them the leftovers of the mushrooms. Not for a million years. The kids ate the leftovers, but there was no mushrooms on them. I don't think they were scraped off. I don't think they'd ever been on there. They were probably the leftovers of Erin's portion, because Erin's portion did not have any poison on it, did it? So, you know, allegedly. So I do think Erin loves her kids. I don't think anyone has put any dispute into the fact of Erin being a good mother, loving her children. Do you know, sometimes things just go wrong in life. You can never. I'm preparing a video at the moment about a cold justice case, and you never know what's going on in someone's mind. You know, Erin, whatever the motive was, we're going to look at a little video that sort of tries to explore what the motive was, or is it even important? I think this is the biggest problem in this case. People are thinking, why did she do it? We all want to know why. You know, normally there's a reason, like someone's going to take your kids off you, or someone's going to, you know, take half your business off you, or someone's seen somebody else, or someone's found out about your affair, or whatever. You know, there normally is a motive, and I think this is a problem in this case. There's not a clear motive, but I don't think there's any dispute. Erin loves her kids, and that's it. So when she started smiling, seeing her son playing with his granddad, she was probably smiling at the sight of her son. But then you've got to think, well, why would she take his granddad away from him?
She smiled at that, and that must have been a really nice moment for her. But most of the time, as you're watching now, it's just a face of pain, you know. And I think that the starkest moment I saw was when her daughter, the evidence of her daughter was played talking to a police detective, and she was this tiny little 9-year-old that was being swallowed up by this green chair, and her pink trainers are just dangling over the edge because her legs don't even touch the ground.
Yeah, and then after what I've just said, that she's a good mum, then you think, well, how has she ended up putting her kids through this if she's guilty, for having to testify? I mean, don't forget, the kids testified on a video. They weren't there in the courtroom. The kids are under 16. They can't be named for legal reasons. But this little girl is only 9 years old. You know, was Erin so sure? I'm starting to think now, my thoughts are starting to go in the way of, I don't believe Erin maybe meant to kill them. Maybe she just thought she would just poison them and make them, you know, it's like make them feel bad, and that'd give her an inner satisfaction. I'm starting to think maybe she did not intend to actually kill them. And Maria, what you're saying there, I think, yeah, if Simon would have gone, she definitely would have poisoned him as well. But I'm sort of starting to think, did she not mean to kill them? You know, just mean to sort of make them ill for whatever reason, you know, just because people do that kind of thing. You know, you can't, you might think, you know, as I would think, you can't imagine, you might think about it in a fleeting moment. Listen, you know, I'm no sort of angel. You know, sometimes you get so angry with something, you think, oh, you wouldn't actually do it, poison somebody, even to just make them feel ill. You know, it's a horrible thought, isn't it? You know, there's a difference between thinking, you know, when you're angry or whatever, and everybody has bad thoughts sometimes. Well, mate, you know, I'm sorry, I'm just saying that everybody has bad thoughts sometimes. That's what makes us human beings, you know, and we grapple with our conscience all the time, don't we? You know, I talk about this a lot, and I've thought about it a lot lately. You know, you do sometimes think about bad things, not murder, I'm not saying that, but just silly little things. But that doesn't mean to say that you would do it. And that's the sort of battle within us all, between good and evil, isn't it? It's like, it's all there in us. It's all there in us. We're all capable of great things, and we're all capable of bad things. But, you know, we grapple with it all the time. But something like this, it took planning, didn't it? It wasn't a spontaneous action. You know, if Erin did poison her relatives, whether to kill them or just to make them ill, or Simon's relatives, she did it, she planned it. She dried out the mushrooms. You know, she put them in the beef. It wasn't like a crime of passion where she just whacked him over the head with something because they got in an argument. You know, this is a planned action, a deliberate action. Did she mean to kill them, though, or did she just mean to make them ill? If she even did it in the first place, of course.
And that was the hardest day, I think, for everybody in the courtroom, because so vulnerable, tiny little voice, you know, and she was speaking about playing Monopoly that weekend. And I just thought, that's what you should be doing. You shouldn't be here answering questions about a triple murder.
Yeah. So we've heard from Erin's family and friends. Are we likely to hear from Erin herself?
I don't know yet, sincerely. So the onus is on the prosecution to prove its case. The defence doesn't have to put up any witnesses. It doesn't.
Yeah, that's something I've been wondering for ages. Are we likely to hear from Erin? Is Erin at any point, do you think, maybe going to change her plea? Plead guilty? Or plead guilty to manslaughter? Accidental death? I don't know what they would call it. If she eventually turned round, if her lawyer advised her to turn around and say, look, you know, the evidence against you, because we haven't heard the worst evidence yet. The evidence against you is overwhelming that you put those death cap mushrooms in there. You know, is she going to sort of change her plea to guilty to manslaughter maybe? Personally, I think that would be her best option. If I was her lawyer, I'd be saying to her now, look, you know, it seems clear, because there's other things going to come out, it seems clear that you put those mushrooms in there. Maybe in your best bet now is to be claimed didn't mean to kill them. What do you think? Let me know anyway.
Doesn't have to put Erin in the stand. That's her decision. So I don't know whether she'll decide to do that. If she doesn't, that's no adverse inferences would be drawn there, but we just don't know. So we've got maybe a couple more weeks, if that, of prosecution witnesses, and then we get into the defence witnesses if there are any.
Something that is not part of the prosecution's case, at least so far, is motive, which is really interesting.
Well, that was interesting what she said. We'll go through the prosecution witnesses and then the defence, if there are any. Who can defend her? You know, what is her defence? What witnesses can defend her? You know, if the prosecution witnesses to come will be the police, I suppose, who said that, you know, the people who found this dehydrator that she apparently discarded, it had her fingerprints on it. It had traces of death cap mushrooms in it. There's digital evidence showing her, you know, around the areas where you can forage for death cap mushrooms. So these are things to come. Just makes me wonder, is something going to happen?
They have not tried to identify one. There doesn't seem to be an argument about one. How is that going to affect the trial?
I found that really interesting too. And you don't need motive to prove murder. And the prosecution has said we're not even going to offer one up. But often it's helpful to inform intent. And you do need to prove intent beyond reasonable doubt to prove murder. So 12 jurors will have to unanimously agree beyond reasonable doubt that she deliberately poisoned her in-laws. And they'll have to do this after the bulk of the evidence so far, and there will be more. But the bulk of the evidence has been that she loved them, that she loved her in-laws. We have heard some texts that she was frustrated at them trying to get involved, you know, in the to do with school fees and things like that. But most of the evidence is she loved them. So intent is something that's going to be a big issue at this trial. The prosecution, of course, is alleging she did intend to kill them. And it says that she did incriminating things after the lunch, like dump the dehydrator at a tip and lied to police. The defence, however, says it was a terrible accident, that it was a tragedy. And Colin Mandy, her defence barrister, Colin Mandy SC, put an interesting question to the jury. He said, could she have panicked? You know, if you've cooked a meal and 3 people end up dead, you know, might you behave in a way that's a bit odd? Might you lie? Might you panic?
It's all part of it.
Nah, I'm not having that. So, yeah, just apply it to yourself. So you cook a meal for 4 people in your house, and they all go down with food poisoning. Maybe 3 of them die. So what, you cover up the evidence? Of course you don't do that. No, I'm not having that, Mr. Mandy. I think that's a poor defence if that's all you've got. That you're saying, oh, she panicked. So she threw away the evidence, even though she was innocent. You know, I think that's cojones, absolute cojones. If I had a dinner party here at my house, 3 people died, I would do my utmost to find out what had happened to them. You know, why would I think that people would think I'd tried to poison them? You know, I wouldn't even think that for a minute. If it was because, I don't know, they'd had bad prawns or something, you'd be like, oh, I bought those prawns from that shop, go and get them and prosecute them. You wouldn't be trying to cover it up. So, no, I'm not having that.
People might not know, but there's a ballot, isn't there, to get a seat in the court, Rachel, every day?
There is.
6 people only. I mean, how do you feel when you're waiting to know whether your name's called out or not?
Well, we have got a seat for some of the days, but often we thought that there'd be a lot more general public, and maybe after this there will be, but I've managed to snare a seat on a side bench.
Yeah, so just a reminder, the trial is not being televised, it's not being recorded, none of it, but the media are allowed in there. I think it's 6 media representatives a day are allowed in, and then they can report on it, no problem. But there is no photos, no actual recordings, and of course we can't see what the jury can see, but the media are allowed to report on whatever they like. So it's sort of semi-public trial, isn't it?
When I've missed out on a media seat, so I've been there for most days to see the gravity of what's going on in there. And it has been, like I said, it's been really intense. And in the public, I listen to things, you know, like jokes about mushrooms and memes on Instagram. So I guess I'd just like people to remember that 3 people have died, and, you know, communities are grieving, and a whole family has been demolished.
Yeah, there's the intrigue and then there's the seriousness of the situations.
No, and it's true with all true crime cases, isn't it? Of course we're intrigued, especially in a case like this, which is, well, do you know what? Have we ever seen a case like this where somebody's invited their estranged in-laws over to lunch and poisoned them with death cap mushrooms? You know, certainly not. So, of course, everybody's intrigued. You know, you can't make people not be intrigued in a case like this. But yeah, it's serious all the same, isn't it? Because 3 people have died, and we have to remember that, and we have to show respect always. Okay, now where are we now? So we're going to another sort of summary now. This is from The Australian, which is talking about 3 key witnesses so far that have spoken.
My name is Ellie Dudley, and I'm the legal affairs correspondent with the Australian newspaper, and I'm coming to you from Chile Morwell, a tiny town of about 13,000 people that is currently hearing possibly the biggest criminal trial of this year. That is, of course, the criminal trial of Erin.
I think this is interesting as well, because it's such a tiny town. You know, we hear that so often as well, don't we? Oh, nothing like that ever normally happens here. We can't believe this has happened. But I personally believe that in small towns are more likely for something to happen. When I think about my little village and all the things that have happened here since I've lived here, you know, you just won't believe it. Because small towns hold big secrets. And you just literally never know what's happening in someone's mind, what they're planning, what they're doing. It's quite scary, really, isn't it? Anyway, here she is, Erin.
Erin Patterson, the Leongatha mushroom chef who was accused of murdering 3 of her ex-husband's relatives and attempting to murder a 4th by feeding them a poisonous beef Wellington at a lunch at her home in 2023. Erin Patterson has pleaded not guilty and has always denied any wrongdoing. I've been in Morwell for about 2 weeks now covering this trial, and we have heard from some pretty interesting witnesses. I'm going to take you through 3 key witnesses that we've heard from. The first key witness is Simon Patterson. He is, of course, the estranged husband of Erin Patterson, and he gave evidence pretty early on in the trial. Now, we know that Simon's parents, Don and Gail, and his aunt and uncle, Heather and Ian, actually attended the lunch. Don, Gail, and Heather did not survive after eating the beef Wellington, while Ian Wilkinson survived after a lengthy period in hospital. Now, Simon Patterson gave evidence about the fact that he was actually invited to the lunch, but he told Erin Patterson that he was too uncomfortable to attend. He pulled out at the last minute the day before. He also told the court about his relationship with Erin. He said the pair split for good in 2015, despite the fact that the earlier parts of their marriage had been marred by short periods of separation. He said when they split in 2015, the relationship remained amicable. They went on family holidays together, they co-parented their children, but he said that sort of changed in 2022 when he accidentally, he said, marked himself as separated on his tax return. Erin was upset by that, he said, and asked that he start paying her formal child support so that she could claim the family tax benefit. Now, the second witness that I'm going to take us to is Ian Wilkinson. Ian Wilkinson, as I mentioned, was present at the lunch and survived after a lengthy period in hospital after eating that beef Wellington. Now, this was the first time that we had heard the full account of Ian Wilkinson publicly. He's the pastor of the Corumburra Baptist Church, which is the church that Erin Patterson, Simon Patterson, and their 2 children attended together. He gave evidence about being at the lunch. He said that he and his wife Heather were happy and excited to attend this lunch because his relationship with Erin, he said, was unremarkable. They were more like acquaintances, and he had hoped that this lunch would improve their relationship. Now, he gave evidence about being at the lunch and noting that while he and the other guests were eating off of large grey plates, he noticed that Erin Patterson was eating off of a smaller, tan-coloured plate. He also gave evidence about Erin Patterson being reluctant to let her guests tour her pantry and how she rejected help from her guests when they offered to help her plate up the beef Wellington. Now, the third key witness that I want to take us to, or key witnesses, I should say, are the kids of Simon and Erin Patterson. Now, they can't be named for legal reasons, and they didn't give evidence in person. Instead, the jury was played pre-recorded evidence that they had given in police interviews in August 2023, a few weeks after the lunch. Now, the daughter, the 9-year-old daughter of Erin and Simon Patterson.
Yeah, how awful that these young children have had to give evidence, a murder trial against their mother. I know they haven't had to go to the trial. These are videos that are being released, but this is their grandparents that are deceased. How will these children ever recover from this trauma? It's awful.
Spoke about how she, her brother, and a friend weren't welcome at the lunch. She was told by her mum that they wanted to discuss some adult stuff at the lunch. And so they went to the McDonald's down the road, and they also went to the movies while the lunch was going on. She spoke about eating the leftovers of the lunch the next day and how she was taken to hospital on the Monday after the lunch, after the lunch guests had fallen ill. Her brother gave quite similar evidence in his police interview. He spoke about going to McDonald's and going to the movies and eating the leftovers. He said the leftovers was some of the best meat he had ever eaten. But he also spoke about clearing up the plates from the lunch when he returned to the house after it on the Saturday. And he's described the plates as white. Now, we've had 2 weeks of this trial and we're about to enter the third. And you can follow along with all of our coverage at theaustralian.com.au.
Yeah, that's strange, isn't it? Because, of course, Ian, the survivor, He said that the plates were grey, except Erin's plate, which was a different size and a different colour. But the children said white. But, you know, do children notice colours so much? This is the problem when you're dealing with witnesses. You never, you know, it's difficult, isn't it, to say. And then didn't the children say, I'm sure in one of the things we looked at, the children said their particular plates, the children's plates, were red and black or something. Again, another colour. So anyway, that was an interesting thing to talk about these three key witnesses. And now we're going to look at where I've got a few things lined up here. Oh, so this is a podcast from the Guardian. God, I don't know if I'm speaking English or Spanish. The Guardian Australia has done this podcast. Now, this probably hasn't got all the information in it because it was 5 days ago, but I still think it's a very interesting podcast because this woman is interviewing someone who was actually there at the trial. So that's what we're going to watch next.
So there's been so much.
Oh, sorry, I need to give full credits. I did show it. Let me like the video, subscribe to the Full Story podcast, just to give them credit. Thank you for this.
The allegation.
And this was so interesting because I think this will not have looked good to the jury. That at the end of the day, Erin Patterson at that lunch said she had cancer. Said to her guests that she had cancer. They all prayed for her, you know, because of what she said. Now, her defense said, no, she did not say she had cancer. She said that she was suspected to have cancer. And Ian, the survivor, who was very, very affirmative in his tone, he said, no, she said she had cancer. Not that it was suspected she may have cancer, like she tried to twist it to that. So that lie that she told about having cancer, that definitely will have not looked good, will it, for the jury? So this was what was discussed in sort of opening arguments, you know. So these are smoking guns. I mean, we're waiting for the smoking gun. When this comes up in the proper trial evidence, it'll be interesting to see. She was there. She was in areas, according to the prosecution, allegedly, she was in areas where these mushrooms can be found. Why was she there? And then we know she was obsessed with mushrooms. I mean, that is a fact. That's not allegedly. She'd been there on the Facebook groups, saying to all her Facebook friends, you know, that she'd been, since she got the dehydrator, she was powdering mushrooms, putting them in everything, even her children's chocolate muffins. You know, she was doing that. That's from her own lips. So that won't look. So she dumped the dehydrator. Why? So, like they said earlier, did she panic? No, I don't believe that for a minute. God, you'd be like, oh no. Imagine you'd bought these mushrooms in some Asian supermarket. You'd then be like, oh my God, take it to the police. Here, this is the dehydrator. Please take it and test it. You won't be dumping it so it didn't get tested. You'd want your relatives or the relatives of your loved one had died because of a lunch that you'd served at your house. I mean, that's not allegedly, is it? She served the lunch, she cooked the lunch, she served it. You would be like, oh my God, take this dehydrator, test it. These are the mushrooms I bought from whatever supermarket I bought them from. It's not me who did it. It's not me who did it. It's these mushrooms. It was an accident. You know, really, the more I'm now watching this summary, I'm even more convinced that Erin probably is guilty. I mean, her actions are not the actions of an innocent person. So, yeah, don't forget, she said, oh, yeah, she had diarrhea, but then she travelled for nearly 2 hours to be transferred to another hospital. She never asked to go to the toilet once. She then gave the leftovers of that meal to her children, but she wasn't concerned that anything might be wrong with them. She didn't seem concerned that she might have to have a liver transplant. You know, all these things conspire against her, don't they? So, her own defence has agreed she never had cancer, but what he's been trying to say is she never said she had cancer. What she said was it was possible she had cancer or she had suspected cancer. And then Ian, the witness, came in and said, no, she definitely said she had cancer. Now, I'm going to move to another podcast now because this podcast basically is a good podcast, but it's more or less saying what we've watched already. So we're going to look at this podcast, which especially is saying why there is no motive, because this is an issue. Everybody wants to know a motive. Everybody wants to know a reason. You know, that's a human condition, isn't it? So, according to ABC News, this is why there is no motive.
News, music, and more.
Hey, Jules and Jez here, and on Not Stupid this week, we're talking about baking.
Yes, it's a copyright stoush between two cookbook authors, Nagi Mahashi and Brooke Bellamy.
So who owns a caramel slice recipe? You can find Not Stupid on ABC Listen.
I'm hungry.
I don't think it's a good thing that they had an advert on about food to start this podcast, to be honest. But hey, you know, whatever.
He was the sole surviving guest of a deadly beef Wellington lunch. Now he's had the chance to tell his story in court. Pastor Ian Wilkinson has given evidence in the trial of Erin Patterson, who's accused of attempting to murder him and of murdering his wife and another couple. Today, investigative and true crime reporter Rachel Brown on the latest from the Mushroom murder trial. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal Land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Rachel, it's been such a dramatic week in the trial of Erin Patterson. For the first time, we've heard from the sole surviving guest of the lunch, which led to the deaths of 3 people.
Yes, Pastor Ian Wilkinson, he was the only guest that survived that deadly beef Wellington lunch. He gave evidence. He was sitting in the witness box wearing a black vest and a grey-coloured shirt. Erin Patterson is accused of attempting to murder him, and she's accused of murdering his wife, sister and brother-in-law. Now, she sat in the court dock, which was only about 10 metres away from him, and she sat listening intently, mostly a neutral look on her face as Ian Wilkinson gave evidence.
Yeah, it's good to remember that she's actually there in the courtroom throughout this trial. What's Erin Patterson's demeanour been like?
Most of the time, I think she's been staring straight ahead. It's fairly emotionless. She's behind me, so I don't really like looking around. I've noticed a lot of other court journos turning around, and I understand why they need to do that. They want to see kind of interactions or, you know, flickers when certain witnesses get up, but I don't want her to feel like a zoo exhibit, so I've tried not to turn around a lot. But the one time I did see her smile was at a memory of her son making a rocket-propelled car with Don, his granddad, in their backyard.
Okay, so he's taken the stand and he's questioned about the day of the lunch itself, which was on July the 29th, 2023. What did he recall about that day and the meal?
He described arriving at the house, exchanging pleasantries with Erin, talking about the house itself, Ian Wilkinson spoke then of Erin working in the kitchen as the guest stood on the other side of the island bench in the open plan kitchen. Ian said he didn't see the preparation of the lunch itself, just some potatoes being mashed and food being plated up. He described the meal as individual beef Wellingtons with green beans and mash. And he said that Gail and Heather offered to help with the plating up, but Erin said no, she was fine, she'd look after it. And then Ian described the plates, confirming some of the earlier testimony.
Yeah, I remember that, didn't they? Ian said that they offered to help and she refused. But you know what? I don't think that's suspicious in itself. If you have a dinner party, I mean, it depends on your kitchen. I've only got a small kitchen. So to me, the worst thing is somebody in the kitchen trying to help because they're just going to get in the way. But I suppose if you had a big kitchen, maybe that would be easy for people to come in, help. My kitchen's not like that, but I don't even think it's just because I've got a small kitchen. I don't, if I'm cooking something, I'd rather my guests, I'd get them a drink or get somebody else to get them a drink. Sit down. I like them to be talking and I'm just preparing the meal. Same as if I go to someone else's house. I don't want to, if I go to someone's house for dinner, I'm sorry, this probably sounds awful, but it's the same if someone comes to my house for dinner. I don't go to someone's house for dinner to help. If I want to give people a dinner, they come to my house and I'll put the dinner down for them. I'll offer help, but you're sort of always hoping, I hope they say no. Because, it's lovely to have a dinner put in front of you. You'll understand what I mean. If you're a person who doesn't normally get someone else cooking for you, you go into someone's house and they're going to put a dinner in front of you that they've cooked, you haven't had to do the work for it, then yeah, you're really happy with that. Afterwards, you'll help with the washing up and the tidying up or whatever. But, that's how it goes. And if someone comes to my house, I don't want them to help me with the dinner. I'm making the dinner. I'll put it out for them. And if they want to help me with the washing up, brilliant. So I don't blame Erin for that. She didn't want anyone in her kitchen, maybe, or, that's not a judgment against her, is it? Just because she didn't want anyone in the kitchen. I think Erin, if she's guilty, she would have had it all organised anyway. These were the plates that were going to the relatives. This is the plate that's going to her. These are the leftovers for the kids. Not that I think she was even thinking that anything would come of this. I'm starting to think, my impression is maybe Erin didn't mean to kill them, meant to make the meal for whatever reason. But she made sure her kids didn't get any of that, and she made sure she didn't get any of that. But maybe she underestimated the effect it would have on her relatives.
They've heard by her estranged husband, Simon Patterson, about the colour. Ian Wilkinson said there were 4 large grey dinner plates and 1 smaller plate, which was a different colour, and he remembered it being an orangey tan colour. Now, he said Gail picked up 2 of the grey plates, Heather picked up the other 2 grey plates, and then he says Erin picked up the odd plate and carried it to her place at the table, and that's the plate that she ate from.
And then what does Ian say happened over the course of that meal while they're sitting down eating this meal?
He says there was a little conversation mostly about the meal, who ate what. He and Heather ate their whole meals. Well, Dawn ate his and some of Gail's beef Wellington. She couldn't finish it all. After the lunch, though, Ian Wilkinson says Erin Patterson told the guest she had medical issues to discuss.
So after the lunch, she said she had medical issues to discuss. Anyway, and that's an important thing, isn't it, that Don ate not only his plate of beef Wellington, but he ate also his wife, Gail. She couldn't finish hers. She only ate half of it, and Don finished it off, and Don was the first one to get ill.
Announced that she had cancer, and Ian says she believed it was very serious, that it was life-threatening. The defence has told the court, however, it concedes that Erin had never been diagnosed with cancer.
Okay, so that's what was happening during the lunch.
Mhm.
And then the questioning turns to when Ian and his wife start to feel really ill.
Yeah, they felt okay during the afternoon and in the evening, but in the night they camped out beside various bathrooms each, both experiencing vomiting and diarrhoea. He says that Simon Patterson called him because Simon had heard his parents are sick, Don and Gail. Simon called to see how they were.
It's ironic, isn't it, that it took so long. It was nearly, what was it? So almost 12 hours before the symptoms started properly.
They were reluctant to go to hospital, but Simon was adamant that they should. So he drove them to Korumburra, but the Korumburra beds were full because Don and Gail were there. So he drove them onto Leongatha Hospital. The next day, a doctor informed them of suspected mushroom poisoning, and they were both advised they needed time-critical treatment. So they were transferred to Dandenong Hospital. And Ian Wilkinson says the last thing he remembers is being given a charcoal substance to drink at Dandenong. And then he doesn't remember anything after that. And during that time, his wife passed away. The two women died on the Friday after.
Yeah. So this poor guy, he was given that charcoal stuff to help him get better, which he did get better. And that was it. He doesn't remember anything. And in that time, his wife died. So very sad.
The lunch, Don died the next day. I think that was the same day Ian was put into an induced coma.
Okay, and Rachel, as you mentioned, the court has also heard from Erin's ex-husband, Simon. So just briefly, what did he share with the court? Because he was actually invited to the lunch, wasn't he? But he didn't go to it.
And he did say yes. He was invited 2 weeks out. He initially said yes, but the jury was shown a text exchange where Simon, the night before at around 7 p.m, pulled out. He told Erin via text he was too uncomfortable. Erin replied that she was disappointed. You know, she'd spent a lot of time and money on cooking this meal. She wanted him there because she said in the text message it might be the last time she could host a lunch like this. Simon's testimony outlined his relationship with Erin. He said that despite separating in 2015, the pair had remained amicable until the end of 2022. Now, that's when tensions arose when Erin found out Simon had listed himself as separated on a tax return. So that has implications for the kind of government benefits that Erin could claim, including child support. So Erin apparently was not happy.
Honestly, the more I watch this case, I think that is the motive. If there is a motive and Erin is guilty, that's why. When he declared himself as separated on that and it affected her benefit, well, I still can't really understand how she could have got any benefits because she inherited $2 million from her grandmother. Why could she even get any benefits, really? But anyway, never mind. I think that is the motive, because although that Erin, if there is a motive, if she is guilty, of course, allegedly, she was angry with that, even though she didn't really want to be with Simon. She didn't like the fact that he said that he was separated, because perhaps it affected some way her financial thing. If there's any motive in this case, to me, that is the motive. That is the motive. That's what I believe.
And sent, quote, extremely aggressive messages to the family group chat over these child support payments in the months leading up to the alleged murders.
Okay, so Rachel, the court has also heard this week what Erin Patterson was doing in the lead up to this deadly lunch. Now, this goes to friends that she'd made online. They were called as witnesses, weren't they?
Yes, several women befriended Ms. Patterson online on a Facebook group chat that started talking about the investigation into Kelly Lane. Now, she's the water polo player who was charged over the disappearance of her newborn baby. So it started as chat over that. It grew into things like about current affairs, their lives, their kids, and cooking.
And the jury was shown a series of screenshots from their group chat, which showed Erin's enthusiasm for cooking with mushrooms.
One of the women told the court she seemed to really like mushrooms. She'd bought a dehydrator. She was excited about that. She'd been blitzing things, hiding powdered mushrooms in everything, mixing it into chocolate brownies. She said the kids had no idea. So the court was showing this Sunbeam Food Lab dehydrator that she'd bought for $229, if you're interested. And she then also was asking for advice about cooking beef Wellington because she hadn't done it before. One woman chimed in with some advice, and then Erin asked what kind of cuts of meat would be best.
And the court also heard that Erin was talking to this group of friends online about the relationship that she was having with her ex-husband, Simon.
Yeah, one friend mentioned coercive control 3 times and was asked why she put abusive when it came to Simon Patterson in her police statement. She said, well, that's what I consider coercive control as abuse. And a couple of the women used the word controlling when it came to Simon Patterson. One said that Erin had painted her husband, who's a devoted Baptist, as coercive and abusive, and she spoke about how the religion of Simon and his family was a point of tension. She said that Erin had said she was an atheist. Sending the kids to a religious school was apparently a point of tension. We also heard that Erin wasn't that happy with Simon's cleanliness and how he kept his house, you know, when the kids went over there.
Oh, yeah, that was another thing that she said, didn't she, that the house wasn't clean, his house wasn't clean, and she actually went over there and cleaned it. And it was like, oh, God, you know, why would you go and clean your ex-partner's house? But, of course, her kids stayed there occasionally, so she would be bothered about that, I suppose.
So hearing that and watching Simon Patterson, who was sitting in the courtroom at the time, I just thought this would be so uncomfortable for both of them, listening to all this, you know, the detritus of their relationship on show for all to see.
Right, well, Rach, that's some of the key evidence that the court has heard already, but let's just zoom out for a moment. It's all still playing out, of course, but just explain to me and remind me what the prosecution's case actually is. What are they putting to the jury?
The prosecution, led by Nanette Rogers SC, is alleging that Erin deliberately poisoned, with murderous intent, each of her lunch guests. Now, the prosecution says that Erin invited Don and Gail Patterson and Ian and Heather Wilkinson for lunch on the pretense that she'd been diagnosed with cancer and needed advice on how to tell the kids. But the prosecution says Erin didn't consume any of the death cap mushrooms, but just pretended she was suffering the same type of illness as the lunch guests to cover it up. Now, the prosecution is alleging Erin told a number of lies. They are where she had sourced the mushrooms. She says it was from Woolies and an Asian grocer. The prosecutors allege Erin used iNaturalist, which is a website to locate mushrooms and other flora and fauna. The jury was told of 2 posts to that iNaturalist site, 2 sightings of death cap mushrooms in the Lock and Outram areas. And the prosecution says that Erin visited both of those towns, Lock and Outram, soon after those posts were made.
All right. And quite interesting, Rachel, that the prosecution has told the jury it doesn't need to have a motive. It's not alleging any motive.
No, and Sam, it's not one of the 4 elements of murder that the prosecution needs to prove. And Dr. Rogers SC said in her opening remarks, you might be wondering now, why would the accused do this? What's the motive? You might still be wondering at the end of the trial. But motive is not something that has to be proven by the prosecution. You do not have to be satisfied what the motive was, or even if there was one. But Sam, I will say it might not have to prove motive, but it does have to prove intent. So it seems that without a motive, the jury will have to still somehow decide if Erin Patterson did deliberately and intended to deliberately poison her guests with death cap mushrooms.
And Rach, of course, Erin Patterson has pleaded not guilty to all of these charges. So what is her defence arguing in the court?
When the trial opened, her defence barrister, Colin Mandy SC, said there was no intent to hurt anyone and the deaths were the result of a tragic accident. He said...
Right, now I just want to finish that there because I do think that's true, or... You know, what I'm starting to think is, and as I say, just my thoughts, literally everything I'm saying on here are my thoughts. Doesn't mean to say, you know, it's true. Hang on, let me put my, everything I say on here are my thoughts, my opinions. That's all that I try and, you know, provide the facts that go with it. I'm telling you what's been presented at the trial, but I've got my thoughts. Some of you will agree with them, some of you won't. You're free to put your opinions down as long as you don't attack me or anybody else. But I'm starting to sort of get this feeling. I don't think Erin maybe intended to kill these people. I think Erin intended to make the meal. It was like a bit of a revenge thing. I do think she's guilty. I do think she put the death cap mushrooms in there, but I think she maybe misjudged, maybe didn't mean to kill them, meant to make the meal, and it all backfired terribly. What do you think? I mean, let me know anyway. Do you think she actually intended to kill them, or do you think she's totally innocent? It was all some accident, you know, from mushrooms that she bought at some Asian grocers that she can't even remember who they were. Let me know what you think. Anyway, and tomorrow I'll be back with the next day of evidence. What will happen? It's interesting. Week 3, day 10 of this trial. What's going to happen? I think it might all even get wrapped up this week. I don't think, you know, they initially said it was going to take between 4 and 6 weeks, and they're already saying it's going to take less than that. I won't be surprised if it's all wrapped up by the end of the week. It'd be an interesting week. Anyway, I hope you'll join me. Thank you for joining me today. I'll see you really soon. Oh, and thank you, replay crew. Thank you, lurkers. Thank you. Oh, let me put my banner on. Thank you to everyone who watches, likes, subscribes. God, I can't believe my voice is going. You know, I've realised I can't talk this much because along with the lives that I do or the videos that I do, and then of course my sort of other job is Spanish teacher. That's all talking. Everything I do is talking. So I've got to rest my voice because you can hear it's going. Take care. I'll see you really soon in the next video. Thank you so much. And until I see you again, may your God go with you. Bye.